Hi, my name is Antonis and I'm the painter of this video. Today I want to share with you the process of painting this portrait of Virgin Mary by Jan Van Eyck, a Flemish artist. And I want to share with you some thoughts on the process of Chiaroscuro, Sfumato, and how I achieve this beautiful effect that we so often see on those traditional oil paintings of the past. And it's always a riddle how they have managed to achieve these beautiful flesh tones. So stay with me if you are interested in that. I will try to explain the process as thoroughly as I can, and I'm pretty sure you'll find something useful in this video. So as you see here, I've already transferred my drawing on my board, and I've done the underpainting of the face of Virgin Mary. I'm just using some watercolor-like process, just with ivory black. That is more dense and more thin in areas. I have done the underpainting. And after doing so, of course, I've painted parts of the crown, and now I'm ready to proceed with painting the face of Virgin Mary. Now the underpainting helps me keep the areas of light very light. I don't cover the whole face area with Verdaccio, a base color that we so often use for medieval, Byzantine and early Renaissance painting techniques, but instead here this underpainting lets the light areas being shown, and after doing so in pure black, as I said, I have painted a thin layer of the shadows with a dark brown greenish color in the areas of the shadow. At this point you see me painting the light on the face of Virgin Mary, and as I'm painting this, I'm using a very thin layer of color that consists of titanium white, some yellow ochre, and a little bit of alizarin red, just a little bit. So after I've painted this first thin layer, and you see how on the area where it needs to be blended with the shadow, I used a more thin layer of the same color. Now as I proceed, I will try to blend in a more colorful way the light with the shadows. I hope this makes sense to you as I'm explaining the process. If not, you can just see the visuals. I think the visuals are self-explanatory. Thank you for being here, for staying with me. I'll do my best really to explain what I'm doing here. So now I'm doing a second, let's say, layer of color, and this is a little bit darker than the previous flesh tone. This color consists of yellow ochre, titanium white, and again a little bit of alizarin red, along with some cadmium yellow, just a little bit darker and more fleshy, let's say, than the previous one. And with this I'll try to paint on the areas where I need some blending to happen. The consistency of this color is thin. It's not very thick, not very thin, and the important thing here, this is very important to know, is that the color is just thinned down with turpentine oil. I don't use any linseed oil at this point. I just use turpentine oil, and this really is helpful because it does make the color easier to handle when we paint in such a delicate way, and it allows the color to dry very quickly, to be absorbed and dry very quickly, and to proceed with painting more and more layers onto it. So with this second layer, little by little, I will do some blending, and now as you see, I proceed with an even darker color that is relevant to the first green brownish color that I've painted the shadows with. And with this color I will do a further blending. I will go on the edge where the shadow meets the light, and I'll try to do some blending there as well. At this point I'm not preoccupied with the smooth texture, let's say, on the face of Virgin Mary, of the color, but more into just applying the right values of colors, and creating this sense of chiaroscuro. As you see, I'm using a very soft Kolinsky brush, and this is unusual for most modern, let's say, oil painters. We're accustomed to using brushes that are more rough, because the use of color in oil is harder, is thicker, so we need to move the color around, and in order to do this we have to use harder brushes. Here though I'm using very thin layers of color, and that's why the brush I need is a brush that I use for tempera, for egg tempera, or watercolor even, to just paint softly with. If you want to learn more about traditional painting and how to paint like the masters, join me at my Patreon page, where you can find exclusive content that I upload on oil painting, egg tempera painting, iconography, some lessons on drawing from life, and so much more. Page where you can support the production of my videos, and you can learn so many things about painting. Thank you so much. I will see you at the studio. I have to say about my palette that is a palette that I almost don't use any black color, and this is very helpful because it will keep colors saturated. They will not be their chroma will be very strong and as it should be. So make sure that you understand how to darken your colors, how to play on this value scale without using much black. Now, in order for you to paint something in the Flemish tradition, in general, the way the master painters used to paint, you really have to be comfortable with drawing. You have to draw a lot to understand the shapes of shadows, the shapes of the objects, and to really understand the nature of light, how light can create some drama, how important, how those painters staged their models in order to achieve this dramatic light effect on their bodies, on their faces. This is what we call chiaroscuro, and we have many painters from Da Vinci, Caravaggio, but also Rembrandt and Velázquez, all the great masters really understood how to use the light to their best benefit in order to have these three-dimensional depictions, let's say, on their paintings. So play around. If you want to stage your own subject, play around with how the light falls on this subject, and make sure that, depending on, of course, on what you want, make sure that you have some dramatic contrast that will help you create paintings that seem visually more appealing and more three-dimensional. So as you see here, I'm going with a greenish color, brown greenish color that consists of some cadmium yellow, some yellow ochre, a little bit of cobalt blue to darken things a little bit, some alizarin red. I want to create this color, and always yellow, cadmium yellow, leavens things up, makes them more clear, more nice. With this I will paint the shadow part. And I'm using the brush at this point in an almost linear way, the way we used to paint in the Byzantine masters used to paint, and the early Renaissance and medieval artists used to paint, because at this point I'm just going to place the color on the face, and I'm not yet interested in smoothing things up. Of course, there is some smoothing going on, and I'll try as I proceed to create this sfumato-like effect. Now, for sfumato, you can I have a video on sfumato, but what we know is that this smoke-like effect is created by adding very thin layers of color, and many people avoid this technique, or they are so confused when they listen about the technique of sfumato, because it's just not practical to, as they think, to wait for each layer to dry before applying the next one. With this technique, and by painting with thin layers that are just thinned down with turpentine oil, we are able to paint many layers of color, one upon the other, without having to wait for each layer to dry. The color is still manageable, it's still paintable, and it's almost used like tempera. When I was seeing these paintings, I was always amazed by the details, by the mastery of the painters, and I used to think that those masters, they have to be comfortable with their color. The color has to be totally under their control. The color and the brushes have to behave exactly as they want them to behave. And always when I used oil to paint, this seemed to escape to me. It was always a struggle. Always oil was always seemed to be not 100% under my control, and that meant that I was missing out something. So here I tried to paint with, as I said, with these thin layers of color diluted just with turpentine, and the color seemed to behave amazingly. It seemed to be under completely my control, and it was a great experience, a great painting experience for me, doing this painting of the face of Virgin Mary by Van Eyck. So make sure that you'll paint with thin layers, thin down, just with turpentine on the early stages of the painting. So I'm going back and forth on the values of this painting. I have on my palette, as I said, 3 or 4 colors here, and when I'm at this stage, I observe that there is some warm tones on her cheeks that I have to paint now, and I have to be very careful because I want to paint them in an almost glazing way, in a very thin layers, without disturbing the still wet layers underneath. The layers underneath they're still wet, but they are not extremely wet. They can accept color. I just have to be a little bit careful with handling the brush. This is important to have a very thin, very soft brush here, and make sure that the consistency of this glazing, let's say, that I'm doing is the right one. If I'm extremely fearful of the color sweeping away the underneath still wet layers, I can add a drop or two on this of linseed oil on this glaze, and this way I will make sure that the color will be okay. But I'll try to avoid adding linseed oil on painting in such a way for as long as I can. For this warm glazing, I've mixed the color on my palette that is of cadmium red and a little bit of cadmium yellow. If I want to darken it, I can add a little bit of this green brownish color that I still have on my palette. And very delicately, I will paint this glazing, and now I can further blend this glazing with my flesh tones by mixing those two colors together and very softly, very delicately paint on top and mixing them together. For the sfumato effect, for this smoky transition of the color, Da Vinci often used his fingertips to paint to do this sfumato effect. I sometimes do to correct something. I sometimes use my fingers when I'm painting like this, but I try to avoid it as much as I can. It just seems too risky to me sometimes. But in order to achieve also this sfumato effect, painters do use they use their brushes as their fingers, and I mean, they use their they get a soft, very soft and dry brush, and with this dry brush, they just soften and smoothen their brush strokes together. They blend their brush strokes together in a way that creates this beautiful, very soft, very smoke-like effect. Later on this video, you will see how I do this when I'm adding more light on the face. Now, if you want to see more on this study, how I've painted the crown, the flowers, the hair of Virgin Mary, please follow me on my Patreon account. And I want to thank all my patrons for supporting me there. You can find exclusive material there on how to draw, realistic drawing, on iconography, early Renaissance techniques, etc. Along we have those monthly live streams where we talk, I meet with my supporters there and on camera, and we share thoughts, we share works, and it's really beautiful, amazing experience for me, for my patrons as well, I hope. So here I've smoothened things out a little bit with a dry brush, and as I proceed I will try to smoothen things as best as I can. For my palette, you just have to know that the colors I use are limited. There are not too many colors. So I've used overall titanium white, ivory, a little bit ivory black, some cobalt blue, some alizarin red, some cadmium red, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, and maybe some green. And this is pretty much it. I use the ivory black in maybe in the pupils of the eyes, and that's it pretty much. So now I've, as you see here, this is the day after, where this first part of flesh painting is done, and I felt that I had to lighten the flesh a little bit more. In the meantime, I've painted the hair, and as you see, in the past, for me, it was impossible to paint hair like this using oil. I just couldn't make oil painting behave as I wanted it to behave. But now, with, as I said, with the use of oil that is not thinned down with linseed oil, but with turpentine oil, I managed to make it behave as if it was tempera, and in that way to use a lot of layers, as the manuals say for sfumato, in order to create this amazing, beautiful chiaroscuro effect between shadows and lights. So here, although the layers beneath are still wet, but not extremely wet, also because there is no linseed oil extra linseed oil in them, now I'm more comfortable in adding these lighter these lighter tones, and creating this more fleshy, let's say, more three-dimensional effect on the face. So I'm creating a color that is more light in value, as you see that I've placed on the cheek, the nose, on the forehead. And in the meantime, my preoccupation here is to blend this without destroying or hiding any of the previous, completely, any of the layers that are beneath, to place this color in a way that makes sense, and to really observe the shapes of light, the areas that are in the light, and what shape they create this on the face, and imitate, let's say, or transfer these shapes and paint them on my painting. So you really have to observe your reference a lot, and as I say, it's best if you make some drawings before moving with painting with color, these kind of paintings. It's important to solve drawing issues before really proceeding with color. On Patreon, I'll have the full tutorial of this head, how I've painted the hair, the mouth, etc. Here, I just wanted to keep this video focused on the process of flesh painting, and I was really so excited to manage and create this soft sfumato effect here in this study. you can see how beautifully it looks on the neck here at this point. Although the neck is still, it needs some highlights too, but you can still see how beautifully the sfumato is shown on her neck. Again, at this point, I'm not 100% preoccupied with this sfumato until now that I will take this dry brush, and here you can see the use of this dry brush, how it blends smoothly the light, how it creates these beautiful soft edges and transitions, and of course every now and then I will wipe the color that accumulates on the dry brush. I will dry the brush and proceed. I have a piece of cloth on my other hand and wipe the brush. Sometimes when I'm doing here, another tip is as I am on the final stage of the flesh painting, I will create on my palette a color with a very, very thin color of darker flesh color, maybe some a color that it has inside some cadmium red, a little bit of cadmium yellow, an orangey maybe color, depending on what I want. But I will thin this color with linseed oil this time. I will create this very thin jelly-like color that is extremely transparent on my palette, mostly pure oil, and I will dip my dry brush on that oily, let's say, substance, and wipe extremely dry my brush on a piece of cloth, and I will use that brush as this drying brush to make even softer transitions. I don't know if this final tip, if you understood this final tip, but instead of just using a completely dry brush, I will dip this dry brush on oil, let's say. I will wipe the excess oil away. I will dry my brush, and then again I will use it to tapping and blending the color beneath to create these beautiful transitions. I do hope that you get something useful out of this video, that this video will inspire you to get into the studio, to really paint some more. I have to say that with your support, I want to be more in the studio, and I have to say how this creativity, the painting process really has helped me keep my sanity to be creative, and to really having problems, my problems concerning the sfumato technique, the chiaroscuro meaning, and it's amazing just having to deal with these kind of problems and not anything else at this period. Thank you so much for your amazing comments. Thank you so much for being here, for subscribing to this channel. It really is important for me, and I really want you to take something back and learn something out of these videos. So I'm taking, as you see, my time to really create this smooth blending. Now, if something at this point went terribly wrong, I would say that I wouldn't insist too much on doing this. Instead, I would wait for everything to dry and for a couple of days, and then I would retouch it with a fresh mind, with a fresh start. So these are challenges of using oil as a medium, that sometimes we really have to wait and have other projects going on as we paint in oil. So little by little, this painting really does come to its completion, and here I just have to do some final strokes of light, some final blending. A nice thing that you can also do after this process is finished and the layers are dry, like after a week or something like that, it's to just glaze some areas, use a very thin down oiled color, and maybe apply some warmer or colder tones on some areas. This will create some. This will give some depth and beauty to the painting. So it's something that I want to experiment more, and for sure I will let you guys know, and ladies, what the results of my glazing will be. It's truly amazing how those old masters, especially Van Eyck, who has invented the use of oil painting, how they were attached to detail painting, how they enjoyed painting details, and how beautiful these images are. As I was painting this study of Van Eyck, I was feeling I could feel excited about um, the building of volume, as the face of Virgin Mary was appearing, I could feel this excitement for painting, and I can only imagine how those masters felt when they originally painted these images, how excited they must have been of the beauty that came out of their hands. It's also important, and I have to say it here, to when you do these studies, to really use great reproductions, either by books or by finding digital photographs that show the image in detail. It's really important. It will help you avoid mistakes. It will help you paint really better. It will give you answers when you ask, okay, how has he painted this area? So nowadays we are so lucky to have access on paintings that really have been photographed in high resolution and give us answers to the process of the painter. So here I say this because only on a detailed photograph I could see how Van Eyck has painted each hair of the eyebrows. And of course this is also a disadvantage for me because I wish I was as master as he was. I have to when I have to paint in such detail, I find myself to be really not as him. So anyway, thank you so much for being here in this lesson. Make sure to check my Patreon page if you are interested for some exclusive tutorial there. And thank you so much for subscribing and being in this channel. So stay creative. This is very, very important. Stay healthy. Take care of yourselves. And I think I will see you soon with another video. Bye.